What if I told you one Egyptian pharaoh tried to destroy every god his people worshipped? He shut down temples, erased sacred names from monuments, and declared there was only one true god. His name was Akhenaten, and his revolution nearly destroyed Egypt. For centuries, ancient Egypt was a land of many gods. At the very top was the king of the gods, Amun-Ra, the hidden one, the creator, whose breath gave life to all things. There was Osiris, the lord of the underworld, who promised eternal life. His wife Isis, the goddess of magic and healing, was a mother to all pharaohs. And there were hundreds more, each with their own temples, their own festivals, and their own powerful priests. The center of this religious universe was the city of Thebes. Its grand Karnak temple was the earthly home of Amun-Ra, a sprawling complex of sanctuaries and halls. The priests of Amun were incredibly wealthy and powerful, second only to the pharaoh himself. They controlled vast estates, gold mines, and a huge chunk of the economy. For over 1,500 years, this was the way of things. The gods were eternal, their priests were powerful, and the traditions were sacred. Then, around 1353 BC, a new pharaoh came to the throne. He was crowned as Amenhotep IV, a name which meant Amun is satisfied. In his early years, everything seemed normal. He followed tradition, honoring the old gods, just as his father had. He commissioned buildings at the Karnak temple complex in Thebes, just as every pharaoh did. No one, not the priests, not the court, not the common people, could have predicted the storm that was about to break. Because this pharaoh had a secret, a radical new belief that would tear Egypt apart. 5 years into his reign, the mask came off. Amenhotep IV cast off his own name. He was no longer the pharaoh who satisfied Amun. He was now Akhenaten, meaning effective for the Aten. Who was the Aten? The Aten was the physical disk of the sun, the glowing orb you could see in the sky. For centuries, the Aten was considered just a minor aspect of the sun god Ra. But for Akhenaten, the Aten was everything. It was the one true universal god. Not a god with the head of a hawk or a jackal, but a pure abstract power, a source of light and life for all humanity, not just Egyptians. This wasn't just a new preference. This was a declaration of war. Akhenaten declared that all the other gods of Egypt, Amun-Ra, Osiris, Isis, Thoth, were false. They were lies. There was only one god, the Aten. He then unleashed a campaign of persecution unlike anything Egypt had ever seen. He ordered the grand temples of Amun-Ra and the other gods to be closed. He sent out workers across the entire kingdom with a chilling task: to chisel away the names and images of the old gods from every temple wall, every monument, every public inscription. The name of the chief god, Amun, was especially targeted, erased wherever it was found, even when it was part of his own father's name. Imagine the shock, the terror, for a population who believed these gods controlled everything from the flooding of the Nile to their journey into the afterlife. Suddenly, their king was telling them everything they believed was wrong, and he was violently erasing their past. But Akhenaten wasn't finished. To truly break from the past, he needed to escape it. He abandoned Thebes, the city of Amun, and took his court, his architects, and thousands of workers deep into the desert. There, on a virgin site where no god had ever been worshipped, he built a new capital city from scratch. He called it Akhetaten, the horizon of the Aten. Today we know it as Amarna. This was a massive undertaking. The city was built in a huge natural bay of cliffs, which Akhenaten saw as the horizon cradling the sun. He marked the boundaries of his new world with massive stone tablets, boundary stelae, declaring that he and his family would never leave this sacred place. Akhetaten was to be the pure center of his new religion. It had grand temples open to the sky, allowing the sun's rays to flood in, a stark contrast to the dark, mysterious sanctuaries of the old gods. It had palaces, administrative buildings, and vast residential areas. This move was a brilliant political stroke. By moving the capital, he severed the power of the Theban priesthood at its root and centralized all religious, political, and economic power in his own hands. In Akhetaten there was only one god, the Aten, and only one intermediary, the pharaoh Akhenaten himself. If you're fascinated by these forgotten chapters of history, consider subscribing to the channel. We dig up stories like this every week, and you won't want to miss what's coming next. Life in the new city revolved entirely around the royal family, Akhenaten, his beautiful and influential queen Nefertiti, and their 6 daughters. They were the Holy Family, the sole connection between humanity and the divine Aten. This new religion also brought with it a shocking new style of art. For 1,000 years, Egyptian art had been rigid, formal, and idealized. Pharaohs were always depicted as perfect, muscular, godlike figures, but the Amarna art style was different. It was strangely realistic, almost like a caricature. Akhenaten was depicted with a long, thin neck, a potbelly, wide hips, and an elongated skull. Nefertiti was shown with an almost alien-like beauty. Was this how they really looked, or was it a new artistic and religious statement? We still don't know for sure. The art also showed something Egyptians had never seen before: intimate, loving scenes of the royal family. Akhenaten kissing his wife, Nefertiti sitting on his lap. They were not just gods, they were a family. This was a radical break from tradition, a new vision of royalty and divinity. But what was the impact on everyone else? For the average Egyptian, this was a catastrophe. Their local gods, the small household deities they prayed to for protection and a good harvest, were gone. The promise of the afterlife with Osiris, a core belief for centuries, was replaced with a new theology that seemed to offer salvation only through the pharaoh. While the elite in Akhetaten lived in luxury, there is evidence that the common laborers who built the city lived in squalor and suffered from malnutrition. Beyond the capital, the empire began to fray. Akhenaten was so focused on his religious revolution that he neglected foreign policy. Vassal kings in Syria and Palestine sent desperate letters, which were later found at Amarna, begging for military aid against invaders. For the most part, Akhenaten ignored them. The old military elite and the dispossessed priests fumed in silence, waiting for their chance. Akhenaten reigned for 17 years from his desert city. Then he died, and all hell broke loose. The backlash was immediate and brutal. His revolution had been held in place by his force of will alone. With him gone, the entire system collapsed. His immediate successors barely lasted. The real change came with a 9-year-old boy who ascended the throne. His birth name was Tutankhaten, meaning the living image of the Aten. But the old guard, the priests and generals, quickly took control. They forced the young king to change his name. He became Tutankhamun, the living image of Amun. It was a total restoration. The court abandoned the city of Akhetaten, leaving it to crumble back into the desert sands. The capital was moved back to Thebes. The temples of the old gods were reopened and restored, their revenues reinstated. Tutankhamun issued a decree, a restoration stela, that described Akhenaten's reign as a time of misery, when the gods had abandoned Egypt and the land had fallen into ruin. But it wasn't enough to just reverse his policies. They wanted to erase him from memory. Akhenaten became the heretic or the enemy. His statues were smashed, his temples were dismantled block by block, and used as filler for new constructions. His name was methodically scrubbed from the king lists, as if he had never existed. For 3,000 years, they succeeded. The story of the heretic pharaoh was lost to time. It wasn't until the 19th century, when archaeologists began excavating the ruins of his sand-covered city at Amarna, that his story was rediscovered. The discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb made him famous, but it was Akhenaten who shaped the world Tutankhamun inherited. So who was he? A visionary genius who conceived of monotheism 1,000 years before it took hold in the West, or a fanatical tyrant who plunged his country into chaos for the sake of his own ego? Was his new religion a spiritual awakening, or a calculated political move to consolidate absolute power? Historians still debate it to this day. Akhenaten's revolution failed, but the questions he raised echo through history. He was a king who dared to defy 1,000 years of tradition and challenge the very nature of gods and kingship. What do you think? Was Akhenaten a religious visionary far ahead of his time, or a destructive dictator who nearly ruined his kingdom? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.